18. Don't tell me the conservative movement can't win elections and doesn't have power. This is the power of the conservative movement. This is the power of ideas. This is the power of the citizenry. In the states, we've seen great activity and momentum in many areas and ways towards our principles, from right to work, tax cuts, limits on abortion, to efforts to enforcing voting and immigration rights and laws. But at the federal level, the Republican Party, now in complete control of both houses of Congress, refused to truly engage Barack Obama, the most reckless, lawless, imperial president in modern, if not all, American history. From spending and Obamacare to the EPA and immigration to separation of powers and scores of other matters. Despite having made campaign promises, they've done damn little about it. So, given the disastrous Obama record, minuscule economic growth, massive governmental growth, millions falling out of the workforce, an actual reduction in median income for millions of families, an explosion of welfare benefits, unprecedented waves of legal and illegal aliens, the evisceration of our military, the abuse and nationalization of our police departments, the crushing regulations, destroying American businesses, packing the federal courts with radical activists, the usurpation of our Constitution, including separation of powers in the Bill of Rights, his dripping contempt for our ally Israel, his love affair with the Castros, his tolerance of Islamic genocidal murders, and his hate America first foreign policy, etc., etc. We conservatives are in the best position in 3 decades to win back the presidency in a landslide. That is, only if we do something we have not done since 1984, 32 long years ago: nominate a true, known, solid, unapologetic conservative for the presidency of the United States. How many of you are 45 years or younger? If you're 45 years or younger, you've never had a chance to vote for a conservative in a presidential election. We've not had a conservative administration since the early 1989 January. The same Republican establishment that failed to deliver legislative victories after we handed them electoral victories and lost the last 2 presidential elections with their nominees, resist and obstruct the nomination of a real conservative. But let me be clear, it's not enough to win the nomination by personally beating down your opponents with such vulgar and ruthlessness, espousing conflicting or ever-changing beliefs, trashing the establishment one day, yet bragging about working with them the next. That is, playing both insider and outsider, and then expect these disparate parts of the Republican Party and the conservative movement, having been exploited and turned against each other, to suddenly rally to your cause. Obviously, it is a daunting task to defeat the Republican establishment in a race like this, but it's still not enough. It is the essential first step that must be taken to reach our ultimate goal: the nomination of a principled conservative who we can rely on to try and help restore our Republican Constitution, and who will base every decision that comes to his desk in the Oval Office, every negotiation with Congress and foreign governments, every appointment to every position in the federal government and the federal courts, on securing our liberty and unalienable rights. If we want to make America great again, as Reagan first said, you must get behind the most conservative candidate in this race. And I will close with this. What do you say, Nixon? I didn't know the bar was open this morning. Let me close with a Reagan quote, because people, for some reason, don't want to talk about Reagan, the most successful president in a century. And let me also say this, and I said this at another event a couple of weeks ago. We conservatives have controlled the presidency 15 years or so out of the last century. Coolidge and Reagan, and that's it. What do you say we try again? Reagan said, "You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the first step in 1,000 years of darkness. If we fail, at least let our children and our children's children say of us, we justified our brief moment here. We did all that could be done." Fellow conservatives, let us justify our brief moment here and do all that can be done. And God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
I was born in Greece in 1939. Nazi warplanes bombed us unmercifully. Executions in the streets were common. I saw horror you could never imagine. Human beings became animals, starving and desperate. But me, I was lucky. Soon after the war, I saw the Statue of Liberty, and I cried. I've been blessed by the freedom and opportunity only America can offer. Today, I feel a duty to speak out. There will always be evil in this world, but the one thing that separates America from every other country is our freedom. And the one freedom that protects all the others is our Second Amendment. Never give it up. Never. I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I am freedom's safest place.
That distinction between straight news and opinion is becoming very blurred these days. We here at One America want to be very clear that our talk shows do provide opinion and entertainment, and the hosts there can pretty much say what they want. However, the vast majority of our programming is news, straight, national, international headlines delivered without all the speculation and the opinion you might see on other networks. Just the facts, empowering you to form your own beliefs.
We're America's preferred media source for hard-hitting news, investigative reporting, and deep coverage on politics and policy for over 30 years. We have a team of world-class journalists delivering award-winning news to an audience in every city, every state, and in 238 countries. We are the 17th most read news site in America. Who are we? The Washington Times, America's newspaper.
Well, anyone following Mark Levin has a tough act to follow, but we're going to try, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
I came across an article not too long ago where an American commentator was looking at different things, trying to assess the state of this country as it faced a moment of particular opportunity. He looked at economic situations in our cities, compared them with things in towns and communities, rural communities. He looked at birth rates. He looked at family formation. He looked at the cost of starting a business. And he came to the conclusion that all of those things were going to be important in assessing America's potential, which he believed would be powerful, even though it was at a time of great uncertainty. That commentator could have been someone like Arthur Murray, who just put out a recent book called Coming Apart, a seminal study on the family in America, but it wasn't.
Charles Murray.
The person who looked at that mix of things, trying to assess our opportunity as a nation, was Benjamin Franklin in 1755. He concluded that based on the progress our country was making on those mix of factors, that our best days were yet ahead. Well, we're here to talk about an opportunity to revisit much the very same mix. ACU, the American Conservative Union Foundation, working with terrific economists and eventually state-based leaders throughout this country, has put together something called the Family Prosperity Initiative. We're here to spend some time talking today about how that can help you out in each of your communities, work with neighbors to understand the impact of policies on the things that matter most to all of us. We can all look at national measurements and get a sense of what they mean, but prosperity and success is a personal experience. It happens up close. So I'm delighted and honored today to be joined by 4 distinguished panelists on stage. We're going to spend a few moments talking about some of these factors and what you can do to use them in your advocacy and work in your communities. We'll hear statements from each of our panelists just briefly as we open. We'll begin with Mr. Larry Kudlow, who's known to so many of you, a longtime economist, commentator around the country, and terrific. He'll be followed by Ms. Jelaine Appling, who's the Executive Director of Wisconsin Family Action. Then Dr. Wendy Warshalek, who was one of the economists who helped put this tremendous index together. And finally, we'll hear from former Congressman Bob Beaupre, two-time congressman from the state of Colorado. Mr. Kudlow.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I want to talk about a subject that is, I guess, not my usual discussion on the air, but a very important topic: marriage. Marriage. Economists should pay more attention to and think more about marriage. So, the battle will rage. The biggest issue of our time at home is the lack of economic growth. The issue is why? There are a lot of reasons. I'm not going to walk through taxes and regulations because that's what I normally do. Much of the reduction of growth is coming from an increase in poverty, which is caused by family breakup. That's where it's coming. Study after study has shown married families make more income, make more wealth, and are happier. That's right, happier. I've been married 28 years to a saint. I'm very grateful, and I have a smile on my face. So I want to talk about this for a moment. Family breakup versus marriage. To my way of thinking, there's a path. It's a cultural path, but it becomes a societal cultural path. Hear me out on this. You have a kid, young kid, 8, 10, 12 years old, okay? And that kid comes from a broken family. his or her chances of success are low. That's what the numbers show. They're low. So I suggest the following. Number one, make sure that kid finishes school. School. High school, minimum, maybe community college, learn a skill, maybe go on to a four-year college, but schooling is so important. We're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that anymore. Number two, get a job. Get a job. No matter how good or not good, you're not going to start as the CEO, just get a job. And you know why? Showing up every day is a responsible way of living, and the sooner you get that, the better off you're going to be. It's almost a lost cultural issue. Just work. Now, number three, you meet a girl, you meet a boy. Great. As my wife, my saintly wife, says all the time, before you make any decisions, do your research. Do your research. I don't know, I must have proposed to my wife, I don't know, 3, 4 times, I can't even remember. Finally, she hit the bid. Finally. She was checking me out. I don't blame her. But the real lesson here is not to just jump into bed together, but spend some time talking, learning, relationship building. And then, and here's my key point, and then you have your schooling, you still have to have your job, you go on ahead and get married after some time, and then you have the kid. My point, thank you, appreciate it, I really do. My point is, we are doing it backwards. Backwards. We're having the kid first. Don't even bother with the marriage. Don't even bother with a job. Don't even bother with the education. Where this has come from, I don't know. We've lost track of a very traditional American value, and that is the culture of marriage and child rearing. We must not lose that. A few more points. So much of this is, as I said, a cultural issue, a social issue. It is passed on from generation to generation, but it's very important. Some of it, however, does have to do with economics and the federal government, the role of the federal government. The role of the federal government for the last 5 decades or so has been inimical, in opposition to the kind of traditional culture of marriage and family and child rearing that I'm talking about. The government is providing assistance for people to have out-of-wedlock children, to have fatherless children, not to work, not to fulfill your responsibility in parenting. The government is handing out money and tax credits or direct federal assistance, and it's wrong. I'm not here to be a killjoy. All right? I'm not saying I don't believe in the safety net. My brother, Mark Levin, was just talking. We both worked in the Reagan administration. Ronald Reagan believed in a safety net up to a point. Up to a point. But welfare is not a substitute for marriage, for child rearing, for education, for living responsibly, for making responsible choices. Welfare is not a substitute for any of that. None of it. So I'll go back and end where I started. We have a big problem in this country. We haven't grown the economy in virtually 15 years. The numbers are stark. 1.7% annual rate for the past 15 years under Democratic and Republican presidents and Congresses. They haven't delivered. For the whole prior 50 years, the American economy post-war grew at 3.5% per year. 15 years, most recently, 1.7%. What is that all about? It's about lousy policies, and I'm not going to go through all that, except to say this. The problem of growth and the problem of poverty are the real issues, not inequality, not socialism, government spending, not high taxing the rich, not penalizing American success. The problem is American values, traditional American values, and the decline of the culture of family and marriage. And only we can change this, or bolster it, or teach it. Do you follow me? No bureaucrat is going to teach us that. No House member, no Senate member, God bless all of them. You have to do it right where you are at home in your lives. There are right decisions and wrong decisions. The rise of the poverty class is so tightly linked to the incidence of divorce and out-of-wedlock marriages and kids. It is so tightly related. So you'll hear a lot of good statistics and numbers and indicators about this. I just want to say that not everything is an economic problem. That's me, Kudlow, saying not everything is an economic problem. There are some problems that are social and cultural. And I beg everybody, I'd like to see these candidates talk about it on the stump. We must return to the value and the culture of marriage and parenting and teaching kids the right decisions, not the wrong ones. And if we do that, we'll increase the growth rate, we'll make people happier, and America will be a better country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kudlow. Jelaine.
Well, first of all, let me say that Mr. Kudlow has my vote for president. Thank you for those great remarks, and I completely concur with them. I would say, too, I'm not an economist, but I am a champion for families, and I'm the end user of the kind of products that we're talking about today, the Family Prosperity Index developed by my friends Dr. Wendy Warcholik and Scott Moody. And as I listen to Mr. Kudlow, I'm reminded of several things. First and foremost, I think, is that we need to get rid of the misconception that conservatives are without compassion. We are truly concerned about the well-being of the entire person. And we understand that that well-being is mostly fostered through the family unit. And that family unit begins with strong marriages between a mom and a dad, the natural birth parents as much as possible. I'm adopted, so I include adopted people in there too. But that's the nucleus of how we bring the next generation into this country to make them well-adjusted, profitable, profit-making, contributing citizens. That's the heartbeat of our country. It amazes me that we have ever thought that we could talk about economics without talking about the family. Because it hinges, the economic picture in America, and really in any country, hinges on the well-being of the family. Several years ago, I gave a speech to a mixed group of conservatives, and I entitled the speech, "As the State, as the Family, So the State." And I'm from Wisconsin. I was speaking to people there. I was using Wisconsin numbers, but what I was trying to do was to take the statistics that our state is affording us through all the different agencies that we have that track things like divorce rate, marriage rate, abortion rates, all the fertility rates and all of that, and put together for them a picture that says, we really need to find a way to bring the fiscal conservatives and the social conservatives together, not for ideological purposes, but for survival purposes. We need to find a way to cooperate so that we understand we're all about the same thing, which is making and keeping America great, and keeping us a free people. My friends, truly, when the family units are strong in our states and our country, we can have limited government. But until and unless we return to these strong family units that are in the best interests of the next generation, we stand to lose our freedom. We stand to lose the ability to have a limited government and have a free and prosperous people. I think if you took what Mr. Kudlow said about the economy over the last 15 years, and you superimposed over that the marriage rate nationally. I know in Wisconsin, we've dropped 20% in our marriage rate over the last 20 or 30 years. We've been below replacement birth rate for 40 years. Now, it's hard to find taxpayers and workers and all of that when you don't have people. You know, a 1.9 per woman birth rate is significantly below the 2.1 children per woman that you need to have just to keep your population steady. So this is an important topic. The Family Prosperity Index affords us real data that links these variables that we've been talking about, the very issues that Mr. Kudlow was addressing here about marriage and about the economy of the family and the policies that are put in place by government that make it more difficult for people to have a good job, to find a good job, keep a job, increase their salary and their household income. Those are very real situations. I close with this. I love the fact that Ronald Reagan is being mentioned here so frequently at CPAC this year. A lot of people don't realize this, but on September the 2nd in 1987, after 3 years of consulting with senior advisors, President Reagan issued, and please don't hold this against him or me, an executive order. And it was not the kind of executive order that we've seen over the last 8 years. This was truly an executive order that was towards his administration. It had no lawmaking capacity. It was an approach from the president to say to his agency chiefs, his staff, everybody in his administration, look, before you put a project, a policy, or anything in place, I want you to subject it to a litmus test. The executive order was entitled The Family. It's an incredible document. It's 12606. I urge you to read it. He had about 6 or 8 points in which he laid out questions that the agencies were supposed to ask themselves about how the policy or the program or the project would impact the family unit. Would it increase their earnings or decrease them? What's the merit for the program? Does it make the family stronger? Those are questions that he wanted his entire administration to address. I think we need to get back to that. I think every single elected official needs to get back to that because it would force them to understand that as the family, so the state. The Family Prosperity Index does that in just a beautiful way. It enables somebody like me to use it to affect real change in my state as I work with legislators to say to them, look, we need to pass policies that increase the likelihood of people being able to get good jobs, keep their good jobs, rear their families, make choices. One of the things that I think is so important when families have sufficient income, one of the things they can do is they can make school choices. They're not bound into a one-track system. They have that ability to say, I want to go to a private school, I want to go a different route for the education of my children. That's significant. But that's just one of the kinds of opportunities that people who are prospering as families have. So thank you, first of all, to Wendy and Scott for the development of the index, and I think it is going to be a game changer in the way that we are able to talk to legislators about the nexus of the economy and the family.
Okay. Dr. Warszawiak, the word economy comes from a Greek word that starts with household. And for a long time, we use the word economy in our own common parlance as though it's purely financial. But household and finances, those two things really go together. Dr. Warszawiak, tell us about how this has come together and give us some background on the index and the initiative.
Sure. Well, thank you, Stan. While I'm an economist, I'm also someone who has suffered the turmoil associated with divorce, and that combination of experience on being an economist on the economic side and having been a child of divorce is what drove my husband and I, and it's my personal story, to create this index. I'm that little girl who was sitting before the court-appointed judge because my mom wanted to reduce the amount of time I was going to spend with my dad. And as a little girl, I adored my dad. I'm that little girl who was sitting in a train station in a large city waiting for my stepmother to pick me up in the wee hours of the morning. And my stepmother never showed up. My mom and dad, I'm the child of divorce, as I mentioned, and so both my parents have gone through multiple divorces in their lives. So there were times when I didn't know how I was going to pay for things, food, clothing, because I wasn't always living with my parents. So I'm an economist, but I've also seen the social turmoil associated with the breakup of a family. So this is personal to me as well. And unfortunately, I'm the only one amongst my several siblings who was able to escape that turmoil associated, both the emotional and economic turmoil associated with divorce. Some of the unfortunate results for them have been substance abuse, government dependency, lower educational attainment, and the list goes on. I'm sure I don't have to, you get the point. But as an economist, having marinated on the fiscal policy side and professionally having already built an index, I was one of the original creators of the Tax Foundation's Business Tax Climate Index, looking at how taxes impede our freedom. That's existed for for over 15 years. And then there's gross domestic product. There are all these economic measures that measure the state of our well-being, the state of our prosperity. And then on the social side, siloed on the social side, back in the 1990s, Dr. Bill Bennett created the Index of Leading Cultural Indicators. So we have these economic measures that measure that measure the economic well-being of our culture, and we have a social measure that looks at the trends of social indicators in our culture. But to date, until the Family Prosperity Index, we never had a measure that brings all that data together, both the economic and social side of things, to look at the behavior of the entire person. And so with this index, we will be able to look at the behavior of the entire person.
Terrific. And I should mention, for those of you who might be looking at your devices right now, if you go to familyprosperity.org, you can see this already in action. 5 years of the data have been posted. You can see the results for your state. You can drill down into different variables, look at what's going on, and see how this index is put together. So I'd encourage you to do that. And now I'd like to offer Congressman Popp a moment to...
Thank you, Stan. I'll begin by applauding Wendy and her husband Scott for developing this index. I'm very proud to be a member of the board of the American Conservative Union, and we're going to do all we can to make sure that this is universally adopted and applied, and hopefully move the needle in the right direction for a change with our families and with our nation. I wrote a book, published in January of 2009, and I was bold enough, confident enough, I guess, to suggest an agenda for America, specifically for conservatives and our nation, to get back on track. And that agenda was still familiar to you. We've got to win the war against radical Islam. We've got to fix our border. We need a pro-business, pro-free market energy policy. We've got to fix our education system. We've got to do a number of things that we all know. And the differences I drew in that book between a liberal progressive idea of how to address these issues and a conservative plan were pretty stark. But the last chapter in the book, on purpose, was one that I titled Stand Up for America's Culture. And I brought all of that together, and I said that the difference between a liberal Democrat, they would call progressive agenda, and a conservative Republican agenda on dealing with those cultural issues, I think is the greatest of all the other issues that